Welcome to Vermont Today. I'm your host, Terence Jeroloman, and my guest this month is Chris Pearson. Chris represents Burlington and is the Progressive Party leader in the Vermont State Assembly. It's good to have you here, Chris.
Great to be here, and I just have to say I represent part of Burlington. We have almost 10 representatives.
You represent District 3-4, right?
That's right, which is the UVM campus and then down into the part of the old North End there.
You were elected to the Vermont House last November, and to the same seat that you held during 2006 and 2008. How did it feel to be back in the Assembly after a 2-year break?
It was good. It was really good. There's a lot of new faces, but of course a lot of old friends there. And, you know, even as the Progressive Caucus leader, I'm outspoken and often challenging leaders, in particular the Democratic Party, because they're in charge. But it's a very collegial field down there. There are 150 people in the House, and we come there for different reasons from different places in life. But by and large, people are united around the challenge of trying to make our state better. We differ a lot on how we think that should happen, but it's it's a fun experience in that you sort of are problem solving in large groups of people, and they are good people. I don't agree with all of them. I don't agree with many of them, but on a lot of issues. But by and large, decent people trying to do the right thing for their community. And I have to say, the level of debate that we go through in Montpelier, if we had that all over the country, and certainly in Washington, I think our country would be a whole lot better off. We're very lucky here in Vermont, and it's fun to be a part of that.
When you left the House in 2008, you were the caucus leader, and upon your return, you were immediately reelected to head the Progressive Caucus. Would you like to tell us how that happened? You seem to be following the same pattern as the governor. When he returned to the Senate, he immediately got his old job back.
That's right. Yeah, I should be so lucky. My position has a whole lot less responsibility than President Pro Tem, which is what you're referring to for Peter Shumlin. You know, as a small caucus, we now have 5 members in the House. There are 2 senators elected with a progressive label out of 30 over there. You know, my role as the caucus leader's role is to interact with the media, is to coordinate leadership scheduling and things like that with the speaker, and then it's also to be ready to kind of lead the charge in different debates. In my case, I offered several amendments around some issues that I hope we'll talk about today. So that is not a wildly sought after position in a way. It entails a lot of extra work, and you know, it's not of interest to everybody in my caucus. So when I came back and I was interested in doing it, the 5 members of the House Progressive Caucus talked about it, and in the end they agreed to let me have that position again, and I was really honored to do that. You know, and I think it's important to note for folks watching that 5 people out of 150 doesn't sound like a big deal. It's not a lot of numbers. But there's about 7,000 state legislators in the whole country. And to my knowledge, those of us here in Vermont with the progressive label are the only people elected in the country to the state legislative office with any third-party label. There are a number of independents, but here again, we have 3 of those in Montpelier. So we're, again, compared to the country, we're much more comfortable maneuvering outside of the 2-party systems. And I think that's why we have see Vermont playing a leadership role on a number of issues. That's very important to me, certainly.
Last December, you said that the caucus would focus on health care, labor, and energy issues. Mm-hmm. How did that work out?
Well, as with anything in politics, some good, some bad. I was proud to be appointed to the Health Care Committee. In the House, we get to serve on one committee, one standing committee. So just the fact that after I said that statement in December, and of course progressives around Vermont have been pushing for single-payer health care for decades, I was very pleased to be appointed to the Health Care Committee by the Speaker. He didn't need to do that. It was a clear signal that they were ready to go down a path that they knew we had been advocating for years. So I would say it worked pretty well on the healthcare front. On energy, another progressive, Sarah Edwards from Brattleboro, sits on the Energy Committee, Energy and Natural Resources. She's been on that committee for a long time, a leading voice in closing Vermont Yankee. Of course, that's going reasonably well. We did pass a big energy bill. It's one of, I would say, the centerpieces of the legislative session that should help promote more renewable energy on homes and businesses. I played a little role in trying to generate a discussion around the idea of having an energy efficiency contest. Nothing is cheaper than the energy we don't have to buy, and any sustainable energy solution for our state is going to have to involve more efficiency. Even though we do pretty well compared to the rest of the country, we still have a long way to go. So my thought was you kind of stimulate people to see if they can kind of have an energy reduction contest. My thought was maybe town by town. What I think is going forward in Vermont, and it's not because of the work I did, although we were part of the discussion, is you're going to see in the fall some schools start to do this idea of competing against one another to see who can lower their energy use the most per student or something. So I'm proud of that. Labor is really difficult, really difficult. The House passed a few bills that are labor-related. They're good bills. They're not earth-shattering. And they've so far all stalled in the Senate, so we have some work to do there. But the most important one there was a credit check. When more and more you're seeing people, employers, before they hire somebody, check on somebody's credit. And if you have weak credit, then they don't hire you, presumably. Now that might be appropriate if you're being hired to be a stockbroker or some kind of financial manager. But for more of a regular job or just a sort of not specialized job, it seems kind of outrageous. And particular as we're slowly coming out of this big recession, a lot of people lost their job. They stopped paying their mortgage, or they weren't up to date with their mortgage and other bills, and so their credit rating takes a hit. They finally have the option to get a job, and now their credit rating is being used against them as a reason to hire them. So it doesn't make a lot of sense unless there's a specific concern that, my ability to pay my mortgage doesn't dictate whether or not I'll show up at work at 9 a.m. regularly or do a good job, particularly in the current economic crisis where people have, just been hammered on. So we passed a law, or passed a bill, excuse me, the House passed a bill that says you can't just randomly have credit checks as a process of hiring somebody, unless you're in a very narrow niche of jobs. Again, that's stalled in the Senate, but that, to me, would be one of the better things we did for labor. I'd like to see card check elections so that people can more easily form labor unions, collective bargaining rights. We also, this is significant, we passed the child care worker bill, giving child care workers in the state the right to collectively bargain. Again, that stalled in the Senate, or it came to the Senate pretty late in the game, so that'll be the push there. That would be significant. You're talking about a lot of low-wage jobs, primarily held by women, in a field that's just vital to our economy, to our life, which is child care worker, looking after our young kids. And the data is so clear on child care. If you invest $1 in early childhood education, as it's sometimes called, you save between $7 and $14 down the road in corrections and special ed, and on and on and on. So we have got to make that investment up front. This bill was a small step in that direction. But I had a paid sick days bill, so that if you're sick and you can't go to work, you don't lose pay. I mean, this is a real issue for particularly single parents, and it doesn't really help employers who have sick people coming to work. That bill went nowhere. We have a so-called baby bonding bill, which is a family leave bill. So when my wife and I just had our first baby, she's a little over 3 months old. My wife is a teacher, so she has a lot of, she has relatively generous parental leave. But a lot of workers don't have anything like that. So this bill would have allowed for 6 weeks paid parental leave. That has so far stalled. So you haven't seen a lot of commitment from Democratic leaders to push on the labor front, I would say, unfortunately. That's probably the weakest of those three areas.